Ich bin der Schlüsselmacher. Aber ich mache nicht einfach nur Schlüssel. Ich verschaffe dir Zugang zu den besten Geschichten der Welt. Denn meine Schlüssel bringen dich überall hin und können alles mit dir machen. Ist der hier für dich?
Unlock great stories. Kanal Plus. Stream großartige europäische Serien und Filme.
19 of the hottest years have occurred since 2000. The Earth is getting warmer and warmer, and according to projections, we are currently heading for a global temperature increase beyond 3 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Welcome to our panel, No Music on a Dead Planet. My name is Paulina Parvanov. I'm running the music agency and record label Sonami Timber here in Vienna, and I'm also an active board member at the Austrian Association of Independent Labels, Music Publishers and Producers, which is hosting this panel today. In the next hour, we will be discussing the very important issue of how climate change affects the music industry and its challenging the way we work. But we will be discussing how we can not only adapt as an industry, but how we can take action and how we can take action to avoid further damage to our planet. So let me introduce you to our panelists today, or may I ask them to introduce themselves, like Daniela Weinmann.
Hi everyone, and thank you for attending. My name is Daniela Weinmann. I'm also a musician named Art Beholder. I am also an activist. I'm a co-founder of the music, of the same initiative you see here, No Music on a Dead Planet, or Music Declares Emergency in Switzerland. And yeah, I'm touring by train.
Hi, my name is Sohail Arora, and I'm here from India. I've come a long way. I am the founder of a brand called Crunk. We are a 13-year-old company pushing music in India all across the country. We also do multiple festivals. I run a festival called Basecamp Festival, which is a 10-city festival. And I also curate India's first eco-conscious, sustainable festival called Echoes of Earth, which is now in its 5th year. I'm also a musician and producer.
Hi everybody, I'm a young musician. I'm running a record label called Las Vegas Records, including label services and tour bus rents and van rents. And I'm also co-founder of Music Declares Emergency Austria. I'm founder of Fan Club, a social payment platform, but this is just a side story today, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for being here and discussing with us and with the audience. We would like this to rather be an exchange and to say top down, we have all the answers. So if you have any idea or question for our panelists, please raise your hand. We will attend to you. So Daniela, you're a co-founding member of Music Declares Emergency in Switzerland. How did that come to be? Was there any specific moment where you thought, okay, something needs to be done?
Actually, it has been a very long process. When I was only 19, I was working a summer job at BMW Informatics. I was actually sitting in this office, and while I was writing like letters basically to remind people that they should pay their bills for their cars, I was looking outside and there was a hill and it started burning because it was a very hot summer and the hill was burning, and I was sitting literally at BMW and I saw this, and so I was asking my manager, actually, do you have cars that run electric? And they say, yeah, we have the technology, but we aren't ready to implement it because that would ruin our business model for now, and we want to wait until everybody else has implemented another solution. And so I was really shocked by that. And later, much later, I became a musician, and I kind of forgot about this. But then I met activists, like this is an international initiative, and so we thought we might want to bring this to Switzerland, and I kind of remembered this episode, so I started this. Yeah, or we started this. I wasn't the first. I was maybe the third to join, just to be fair.
So, Andreas, you're also a member of Music Declares Emergency. Some of you might know it, but for those who don't, what is Music Declares Emergency about? What can an initiative like this achieve?
It's an initiative comparable to Fridays for Future for the music industry. We started in April, and actually I got a push from my old friend Hannah Simons from the WWF, and she said, well, look around, there are a lot of initiatives all over Europe. Why are the Austrians always late? Why they're not attending? And I said, yeah, you're right. And we looked around and found some co-founders and other people who were interested, and just founded the organization. Yeah, that's the story basically. We're trying to making impact into like the music industry, labels, musicians, and so on. On the one hand, to be a role model. I think it's very important to have some kind of passionate, emotional, positive way of dealing with the climate change, not always saying you're not allowed to do that, no, you're not allowed to do that, having some kind of positive way with dealing with the issue on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, doing some serious, concrete things like, I don't know, producing green traveling, or producing local physical CDs or vinyls, just doing things like that.
I think we can all agree that we are late, not just in Austria, but the whole world is late to the climate emergency and how to stop it. As I talked to Daniela before, she mentioned that this discussion is around for, I think 10, 20 years now. So Daniela, would you like to share some thoughts on that? Why isn't anything improving? Why is there such a lack of awareness in the music industry that things need to change?
Unfortunately, I think I have to redirect this question to you all, because I cannot answer, of course, for the music industry. But when I was invited to this panel, I did some research on if there has ever been another panel like this, and actually I found a panel that was in 2014 about making clubs more energy sufficient, and they invited quite big stars in the scene. I would say they invited Julie Spicycle to talk on this topic. And then there was an EU-founded initiative called EE Music, and I went on the website, and now this website is kind of a deserted place, and there is like something about bitcoins and some random stuff. So I think this initiative doesn't exist anymore, and this is something we have to take really serious. There have been so many good ideas, and apparently they didn't catch. And this is one thing that really bothers me, that I started off being really naive and hopeful, and I did a lot of research, and I found out there is so many great stuff happening, but somehow it doesn't really affect the music industry. And I think that's a question we have to answer at some point, like why isn't it not working?
So Sohail, you're booking Echoes of Earth, which claims to be India's greenest music festival. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works in India? Is there same amount of climate change or climate emergency awareness, and how does this affect your festival booking?
So India is definitely 10-15 years behind Europe in many ways. We are just building festivals of 15,000-25,000 people, that scale. So it's still early days, but we are the first festival that's making it possible to do large-scale events and still be sustainable. So that's sort of the aim of the festival. So you can also go back with habits that you can use in your day-to-day lives. Starting with basic things like design of the festival. We are a very art-heavy festival, so there's a lot of art installations. All our stage design, everything is made using recycle, upcycle, junk, which is also recycled year after year, the same stuff. So 80% of the festival is using that. Then we are zero plastic festival, all the cutlery is biodegradable. We do a lot of initiatives like plant trees for every person entering the festival, like one per person. And we also do a lot of education, workshops, talks. We're working very closely with National Geographic, so we're also on the conservation side of things, not just sustainability from climate side of things, so because it's all sort of interrelated. And yeah, for example, I mean, even like water, like unlike Europe, we can't drink tap water, we'll be dead, you know, if we drink tap water. So a festival like you not selling plastic bottles of water. So in 2019, we saved 65,000 bottles of plastic, you know, for example. So we are not doing really big things, but we are doing small things that are adding up every year and new initiatives every year. We've not reached the level of how do we do the green traveling bit with the artists, because we're calling artists from all across the globe. But we are working towards working with organizations to offset the carbon footprint in the coming years. So there are initiatives like that we're working towards as well. So.
As you mentioned, travel is typically the largest element of live events' carbon emission footprints. And Music Declares Emergency, for instance, recommends influencing audience travel as the single most significant source of emissions for live events. Andy, let's start with an easy question. How do we do that? How do we influence audience travel?
It's not that easy as you might think. No, well, I think one big issue is like having official or public support, public funding, making trains easier, making trains cheaper, maybe add the free traveling with train to the ticket, for example. I think this partly happens, but should be standard for the audience, on the one hand. Yeah, and also increasing public fundings for artists, like the Austrian Tour Support. I don't know, for example, could double the fundings for climate-friendly traveling, for example.
Daniela, from the artist's perspective, you try to implement green touring strategies, I think. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works for you? Is it easy?
Yeah, I just did a tour by the Deutsche Bahn.
How does that
I don't know if you have experiences with that company. Yeah, it's easier than you might think. Maybe that's the first answer. But it's also easy for me because I'm an electronic musician, so I can carry my gear in very kind of handy, I have handy gear. So I wouldn't superimpose my strategy on any bands that travel with a drummer or two drummers. That's a totally different story. So for me, it's really feasible. And it's actually, I don't know, I mean, it's not cheap, but you also have to be aware of the fact that I would have to pay a driver if I would have like nice working conditions for my tour. So, I mean, if I would have to pay a driver fairly and not just abuse some of my friendships, then it would be maybe the same price. So, yeah, I'm making good experiences, but I think that mostly I try to influence other bands and also other, like the audience, that traveling by train is actually feasible and quite cool. Because I think as an artist, I am an emotional connector to people. So my own carbon footprint may not matter so much in comparison to how I can influence positively the approach of the audience towards trains and stuff. So when you have rappers flying in with a private jet, their fan base is going to want that lifestyle too. And I think that's, I'm using rappers, but I don't want to put shame on that genre, but you know what I mean. I mean, I think we are cultural influencers and we have to use that capital.
So Are venues and event promoters, Daniela, are they helpful? Do you contact them upfront and say, oh, I'm traveling by train and I need transportation to the venue or something like that?
It really depends. I think it's very interesting that if you want to change the structure of things, you really get to know the venues and their philosophy. So I have really interesting conversations with very nice people, and I have very blunt and stupid conversations with people who don't care. So it's interesting. You get to know them if you want to bargain around these topics. But in general, they are helpful and they provide some backline for me, which is also something that should be done more often. So every venue could have a set of stuff that they could provide to the artist easily. And it should also be normal that you can pick them up from the train station or whatever, because I pay quite a big amount of taxi money, which, I do as kind of voluntarily, but it would be cool if they would just pick me up.
So, Hale, would that be an option for you in India at Acts of Earth Festival to, provide the backline for your artists that come in internationally?
We do provide backline for a lot of artists, but I think the challenge is that we are very far from most of the world, so people have to fly in. There's nothing we can do about that. But within India, also the challenge is that India is a very big country. So if you travel by train, for example, you're going to lose 2 days. So if you're touring and you have back-to-back shows, it becomes really tricky. So with bigger artists, it's kind of impossible. But with upcoming artists, I have seen a lot of artists travel by train, bus, also because it's a good way to check out the country, and explore a little more. In terms of, I think green touring is a concept I don't think will reach us for a little bit, but the way we can compensate for that is, for example, as I mentioned, by working with brands that are working towards these sort of carbon offsetting initiatives. And when you're working with, for example, there is a body that's working with increasing mangroves in a city like Bombay, for example, because it's going to be underwater in 30 years. That's what's predicted of it. So when you work, so the government's actually worked on increasing the mangrove all across Bombay in the last 4 years. It's almost doubled. So that's a way of tackling it. So working with environmental initiatives like that as a festival or as an organizer or as a musician is something that you can do to compensate for the travel, I feel.
I think what is interesting that traveling by plane or by train is quite the same with your backline. And there are a lot of jazz clubs who normally have flight-in shows. They provide perfect backline, 10 different drum sets and stuff. So it should be no problem to go there by train as well. A lot of indie clubs don't provide this perfect backline, and you always struggle.
So what's the problem with the indie clubs then?
I don't know. Maybe nobody asked. Maybe they have no space to provide the backline. I don't know actually, but it's possible to have some kind of standard backline. Everybody shares. Of course, it's the club has to take care about it, but it should be possible. It's possible with jazz clubs, so why not with indie clubs?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I wanted to make that too. Because, plane and train is really similar, I think. You can't bring your drum on a plane.
In India, backline's provided by almost every venue from the start. So we've never had that backline traveling culture ever. So that's one good thing.
That's a really good thing. It should be standard in Austria and Switzerland and in Europe as well. I just want to go back for a minute to green touring from the artist's perspective. So it works for you, because you said it works for you because you're a solo artist traveling with your equipment on train, and it's fine. But what about bands? What about travel parties with more than 5, 6, more than 10 people? Andreas, your company also offers tour buses for bands. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, we do. yeah, sometimes it's kind of the only way to get to a venue with a tour bus or something. I think it's not, of course, it's not the most sustainable way, but it's more sustainable than traveling with your own car, with two cars, with old cars. We provide like the latest pollution standard. Is that correct? You know what I mean?
Love
like,
that term.
Like Euro 6C or something, and mild breeds and stuff. But of course, it's not. There are no electric vans with 9 people on the market right now. So it's the latest, and that's actually all we can do at the moment. If you have to go by van, but of course, traveling by train would be a great alternative if it's cheaper. I think a lot of musicians are looking on the price actually. Like flipping every coin a few times, and I think it's cheaper for a travel party for 7 or 8 to go by our bus than to go with the ÖBB.
So it's a money problem then, from your perspective, or from, I don't know what Daniela or Sohail thinks about that. Do you think when artists are provided with more money, they could do easier green touring instead of taking the plane or the bus?
Yeah, but I think actually a lot of artists are kind of so scared about money that if you give them more money, they're going to take the money and save the money. So, I agree. And I think there should be some incentives. Like, for example, there is a government initiative that pays money for your tours if you're in Switzerland, based in Switzerland, and they could kind of bind these to the fact that you have to go by train, and then suddenly everybody would do it, I'm pretty sure. So I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, but it could be a way to set some incentives there.
I mean, there are some kind of traveling by, I don't know, Nightliner kind of status symbol. Everybody wants to do a Nightliner tour or something. Of course, a great new van is kind of a status symbol. And I also think, some bands or acts or musicians are afraid to go by train, having all these experiences with the Deutsche Bahn or something. I don't know, getting late, missing the next train or something. I usually go to Hamburg a lot by train, and it never works actually. I think these are issues too. If it works, it's perfect. You're 2 or 3 hours earlier or faster than by car. But if it doesn't work, you have a problem.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, we tried to talk about solutions. So could you summarize what are our solutions to this problem of green touring? Like provide backline? What did we have? What are your solutions as members of Music Declares Emergency to say what should change in order to...
Public funding to trains or public transport?
But also like promote public transport as an artist, like post about it. I mean, it's the least sexy thing to post about, I'm sure. I mean, but kind of, I see it as a challenge. How can we make that sexy? I mean, it's really like, I can't even wrap my own head around it, but I'm sure there are some creative ideas about that. And also kind of just encourage your audience to come by train, because that's going to be the bigger footprint. And
So like we need role models directed at all of you. Yeah? Want to ask something? Yeah, public transport. Yeah.
It's valid for public transport to and from the concert venue. So something like that.
No, that's very effective, I think, and also just erase the parking lots. I mean, the people go crazy if they don't find a parking lot. Maybe also promote more heavily like drinking, because Yeah. No,
Don't
but
drink and drive, so it's
yeah,
eat
good
like
advice.
that.
Listen to
One
me.
should be drinking a lot more.
No, and the other thing I wanted to say, what I find interesting is you said that there are no electronic vans ready for that, but I have never seen any like music venue installing some electronical like plugs to charge your van. I think that could be also an interesting new idea to do that. I mean, I'm not very much in favor of all the whole lithium industry, but you know.
It's a whole other topic to discuss for hours. So we traveled to the location, and then we're here as a band, as a solo artist, and now we're here and we want to sell merchandise, which is probably also not just cost intensive, but also has an impact on climate change. What's about that? How you handle that at Echoes of Earth? Do the artists, are the artists able to sell merchandise, or do you produce your own merchandise for the festival?
I think in India it's slightly different purely because the festival market works on a very sponsorship-driven model. Festivals are 60 to 70% funded by brands. It's the only way to sustain and make money. So merchandise is very, very small right now. It's like less than 5%, if any, that too. So I don't think that's sort of relevant to us right now. I think the bigger thing is the travel, which is, I don't know how to solve that, to be honest. Because the thing is, the trains are cheaper in India than the flights. Unlike Europe. Trains are more expensive than flights, which is crazy. So, yeah, I mean, train's always the better option, but it's going to take you 2 days to reach the next venue. So, it's just such a big country. So, yeah, merchandise is very small right now for us.
Okay, Daniela or Andreas, do you have something to add about what's with merchandise? Should we use it? Should we sell it? Should we produce it?
Maybe I really want to add to what you said. I think I'm shooting a documentary on sustainability measures within the Swiss music industry and also very big commercial festivals. We're shooting a film about best practices. And what I've actually noticed is that the sponsors have huge power and influence. And for example, I was at the festival and they had a very cool reusable beverage cup system, but the main sponsor was Heineken, the beer company, and they just had plastic beverages like this, and so they sold their own beer within these trays, while you could buy all the other stuff like Coke or whatever in this reusable container. And this made me really angry. You can see that festivals try to do something good, and then a big company who can frankly afford this, I guess.
So just to add to that, with Echoes of Earth, there is no plastic branding anywhere in the festival. It's all on wooden signs. So if you are a sponsor for this festival, you have to live by the ethos of the festival. So there is no plastic cups. It's all recycled. Even we have Johnny Walker as one of our brands, and they give us biodegradable cups and paper cups and things like that. So even the branding is on like wooden panels everywhere. So it's sort of, we live the ethos throughout the festival, even with the branding of the sponsors involved.
So we see it's possible for big festivals and venues. But what about the small bands and artists? They're sometimes dependent on merchandise and also record label stuff. Andreas, as a record label owner, what's your experience? Does the awareness change, or is there an increased awareness of the climate emergency?
Well, I think it's quite important to not overproduce like we used to do. There was some kind of mindset, well, take thousands more, it doesn't cost anything. We changed that and really just produce what we think we will need on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, we try to produce local, like there's a great vinyl factory in Austria, Austria Vinyl, That's a great thing. Yeah, and I think it's going on. There is some kind of sustainable new vinyl material, which sounds very interesting, and we'll probably do that again, or that too. Yeah, I think producing merch for us as a record label, it's a bit easier. We can produce on demand, for example, T-shirts. It's not that easy for musicians because they have to take it with them.
Isn't that more expensive right now to produce on demand than to produce in bulk?
Yeah, it is. But on the other hand, if you have, I don't know, shirts to throw away, or you have the wrong sizes or something, or they're getting, I don't know, dirty, or I don't know. I don't know how many T-shirts we have in our office. They're unsellable. So I don't know. Maybe calculate. I don't know. But on demand is, I think it's a thing. Just to produce what what you need, or what you actually want, or what the audience actually want. Yeah, and there are some other interesting things we don't do, but sounds interesting, like producing T-shirts on the right after the concert. I think Milky Chance did something like that, where you can bring your old T-shirt and they're printing like a 100% unique print right after the show. That sounds interesting too, and maybe it's even worth it because it's 100% unique.
Speaking of uniqueness, I never understood the relationship between music and T-shirts. I mean, that's arbitrary. So why go with T-shirts? And why don't you reinvent like merch all together? Like, why wouldn't you collaborate with a small artist collective who draws like 50 unique kind of drawings that you could sell and do like, just, you know, I think sometimes all these initiatives fail because we are just so boring. I think we are often very boring and we don't really commit to the creative process and try to find workarounds and question, why do we sell T-shirts in the first place? Why does Music Declares Emergency sell T-shirts in the first place? No, of course, because it is a message you carry into the streets. And this is actually what is important about this. You carry it into the streets. You walk around outside of the digital bubble with your, you know, slogan. This is interesting, but we can really reflect on the meaning of this. What is it? What does it do? What are our hopes if we produce T-shirts? Stuff like that. I mean,
everybody has T-shirts and it's a usable item. So it's not overproduced. It's not an additional item. So.
So my boyfriend produced toothbrushes with the name of his brand, and it's a sustainable toothbrush from bamboo or whatever. I don't know. I mean, we can. Yeah, the core of it is it useful? So what can I do that is useful but more sustainable? I don't know.
Maybe I think we'll look at the time. I think it's a time to ask our audience if there are any questions or ideas, thoughts you want to share with us, or ask our panelists.
Any cry of desperation?
Do you have any ideas how to raise awareness for climate emergency, or how to change the way the music industry works right now? Or do you just want to rant? Yes?
That I always get annoyed by is like, because you were talking about like responses and I kept thinking of how do you call that, like these stupid gadgets that are branded that you gimmicks, yeah, but there's a name for it, but I lose.
Handouts or like giveaways.
Which are always stupid. No one needs them, no one uses them, but it's always made of plastic and usually gets thrown away.
Yeah, so may I direct the question? So, but how we can discuss? How can we change that? How can we reduce this wasteful, habits, or how can we avoid this wasteful habits?
I mean, simple things like even when you're selling t-shirts, you put this plastic wrap around it. Why do you need that? You know, like you can just use paper to wrap it up and, you know, like you can start with simple things to reduce the things that are not sort of recyclable, you know, in that sense. So I feel like small initiatives are important.
Also, small resistance. I had this, like the conference gave me this giveaway back, and I just gave it back and said, I'm sorry, I can't use this. So if more people do that, less people will produce it. I think small actions really matter, and this is a very boring thing to say, but because we don't, as human beings, we usually aren't very good in math. Not all of us are good in math, and I think that's also why there aren't many people in this room. Because if we would do the math, if we could actually kind of perceive data, understand data, and have this scientific mode of thinking, we would understand that we are hitting a huge crisis and there would be panic and everybody was in here. But we are really bad at this. We don't really feel that, we don't really get it. And so if you flew here, if you're a delegate and you flew here, and there are about maybe 200 of you, maybe 250 of you, this is going to be a carbon budget of 80,000 tons. And this is like the carbon footprint of one medium-sized club running for more than 1 year. So, yeah, the question is that, I mean, if you fly, that's going to be like, maybe you flew in from Paris, that's maybe 1.3 tons of CO2. But if everybody flies in, that's going to be a huge budget. But also, if you're going to eat 3 burgers at this conference, and there are like 10,000 or 11,000 visitors, that's going to be about the same amount of CO2 that's being emitted. So it's a numbers game, and we don't really get that. And because it's a numbers game, we have to do the small things, because the small things really matter, even if that's so silly to say. But if we all don't eat meat at this conference, it's going to be like 80,000 tons of CO2 less. And this is insane. So we can do a lot, but we can only do it if all of us do them. And you all know this already, but I'm going to state it again.
No, I was going to ask you what your recommendation, what your small action, piece of action would be, what any one of us can do right now to change things or to raise awareness. So for Daniela, it would be eating no meat at this conference, or do you want to add something?
Come to India. We are vegetarian, heavily vegetarian country.
But we need to fly there.
We have such good vegetarian food and so many options that also really helps being vegetarian. I think one thing that I always miss when I come here is I get bored of eating cheese and bread all the time after a point. So, I mean, it's also the culture thing, you know, so some places it's easier to be vegetarian. I think India is one of those countries, so maybe you'll get inspired.
True, very true. And also I wanted to say something to this topic. Can I just chime that in now? People always ask me, is it still okay to fly in artists, for example, from India? And there's a very interesting concept called donut economics. I don't know if you have ever heard of it. And it speaks to the fact that we don't want just climate change or climate gas emission reduction, but we also want climate justice. And I think in the face of like colonialism or our colonial history, I think we have a responsibility to kind of talk about this topic also in terms of equity. And so I think it would be still possible to fly in someone from Bombay to play here. But the question is, if I am like playing there with my small band that doesn't even, have a big tour in India, I think I can eat a lot of vegetarian food to compensate for this flight. And I know I'm taking away a slot from a regional band there, and I'm just coming in with my money and making my Instagram stories there. That's not an climate justice. In terms of climate justice, that's not a good approach. But the other way around, it might be. So just to have said that as well.
So to understand you correctly, so you would decline and say, give my spot away if there's a really good offer. Just asking.
Yeah, I did a tour in China once, and there was a time where the Swiss government funded tours like that. So I was funded to tour to play about 6 shows in China, and it was actually one of the most interesting experiences of my life. So it was great. It was very cool. But I would decline today because of all these things, because I think it's not the time to do that anymore. And I'm sorry that I took advantage of my generation and the time, you know. I don't think it's a good idea that I did that. And I don't know. I mean, if it was like 30 shows, 50 shows, I don't know, it would have been different. But 6 shows might not be enough.
Just to add to that, if you're traveling all the way to Asia and you want to make the most of it, the good way would be to like target 3-4 countries and do like a 1 month, 2 month thing and like spread it out and not just like go zoom and go back. I think that's also important because in India, actually, we can do shows now in 12 to 15 cities by itself, which is at least a month of touring, which is very cool, which never happened before. And then you have China, you have Nepal, you have Hong Kong, you have Southeast Asia. So I think even that is an effort that we make at our festival, is we try to book artists that are already on an Asia tour, so we're not specially flying someone just for our festival, basically. That's also, it helps us financially because the budgets are lesser, you know, so it works economically as well.
Also, I have another idea. It would be really great if you would collaborate with a band, for example, from India, and you could kind of really have a connection. Like you tour together and you get to know each other, and then you could kind of return the favor and do the same for them in Europe. And things like that are much more interesting and much more fair and much more, I don't know, it's going to expand your horizon much more. So I think just don't be like this rich, stupid kid that flies into a country and has no idea about anything and just play in one empty club because nobody cares about you there.
I think that's a hell of a statement to, Andreas, I was going to ask you, what's your small piece of action anyone can take right now, but after this statement...
a bit hard after this statement, but my piece of advice would be like, I have the feeling that in the music industry we're just kind of doing things like we used to do for decades. I think it's time to rethink every step we normally do and say, is it necessary? Is it good for our climate? Should we really do it? Should we really need it? Just rethink every normal step you do.
So Sohail, I'm not sure if you already gave your advice or recommendation for us.
I would just add to that. I mean, you cannot stop touring the world because of that. You have to figure other ways of compensating for it. I would love to be able to bring Indian artists to Europe and take them to America. We don't really get those many opportunities, to be honest. So just saying that it's bad for the climate is not the solution for musicians to stop building their brand and touring the world. I think we need to look at more incentivized initiatives where, you know, you compensate with certain things, you do longer tours, you sort of, you know, as you said, just eat vegetarian food for a month, maybe, I don't know, things like that, small steps that you can do. And also if the government bodies can sort of make public transport incentivized, I think that's really, really something that can go a long way, I feel. So I feel like there can be multiple initiatives that we can look towards, and it should not stop musicians from playing different new countries and experiencing new things.
Thank you. So small steps in the right direction. If there aren't any questions left from our audience. Oh, there is a question.
What we did at JSF this year is we did something simple. We just took out the participants list from our normally printed guides, which was 100 pages of paper that nobody used. And we have 3,000 people already coming. So it was something small. We started to try and digitalize everything piece by piece. Because people are used to getting something when they go somewhere, so people take everything away once. But you can start small and say,
Yeah, that's a lot of paper. And yeah, step by step, I think that's one thing we can all agree on, but we need to step fast, I think. Daniela, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think...
As a closing statement.
Yeah, I think there are countless PDFs on the internet on how to do better practices, as I said in the beginning. And I think what we really need is kind of a change of mind and change of heart, because we will figure out so many good ideas, and we will figure out the ones that suit our niche, like our socio-demographic group or whatever. We will figure out this, but we need to kind of walk out here with the feeling that we actually are feeling too hot, and we are worried about the trees that are dying right now outside of this venue, and we really kind of let that get to us. Because when I know that in 20 years Bombay will be underwater, do I really feel like touring the way I did? If I really let that get to me, I think I can kind of answer a lot of things for myself. And there are so many guidelines out there.
Yeah, I think that's what we all think. Like, does it really get to me? And can I take action if I know that it gets to me? And yeah. So yeah, thank you all for attending, and have a nice day at Waves nevertheless. And yeah, think about your vegetarian meat choices you make today. And yeah, thank you all for discussing this topic with us today, and have a nice day. Bye.